Jake had seen a lot of strange things in his 12 years as a cargo pilot. He had flown through nebulas that glowed like pink fire. He had delivered supplies to colonies built inside hollow asteroids. He had once shared a drink with a species that breathed methane and told jokes that made no sense to human ears. But nothing had prepared him for this. The hyperdrive on his ship, the old and tired Dusty Runner, had failed somewhere between the system and the outer rim territories. One moment he was cruising through the soft blue light of faster-than-light travel. The next moment, alarms were screaming, sparks were flying from the console, and his ship was tumbling through normal space like a stone thrown by an angry child. He crashed on a planet he did not recognize. The sky was purple. The trees, if you could call them trees, were black and twisted like frozen lightning, and the air smelled like copper and honey mixed together. Jake crawled out of his broken ship and took 3 steps before the soldiers found him. They were tall, very tall, 8 feet at least, with bodies covered in hard shells that shimmered like oil on water. They had 4 arms each, and their faces were strange and beautiful in a way that made Jake's brain hurt. Their eyes were like the eyes of insects, made of hundreds of tiny parts, and those eyes shifted color as they looked at him. Blue to green to gold to red. The Jake had heard stories about them. Every human had. They controlled a third of the galaxy. They had been building empires when humans were still living in caves and hitting each other with rocks. And now Jake was standing on there, surrounded by their soldiers, with no weapon and no way to escape. Well, he said to himself quietly, this is not good. The soldiers did not kill him. This surprised Jake more than anything else. They put energy cuffs on his wrists and marched him through a forest of those black twisted trees, across a bridge made of something that looked like glass but felt warm under his feet, and into a city that took his breath away. The buildings were alive. That was the only way to describe them. They grew from the ground like plants, reaching toward the purple sky with spires and towers that moved slowly in the wind. Lights floated in the air without any visible source. Thousands walked the streets below, going about their business, barely looking at the small human being led through their midst. Jake felt very small, he felt very human, and he felt very far from home. The soldiers brought him to the largest building in the city. It was not just a building. It was a palace, a mountain, a living thing that seemed to watch Jake with ancient eyes. Inside, the halls were wide enough to fly a shuttle through. The walls were covered in images that moved and changed, showing battles and ceremonies and moments from history that stretched back thousands of years. Finally, they reached a room so large that Jake could not see the ceiling. At the far end, on a throne made of crystal and light, sat the Queen. Queen was old. Jake could feel her age like heat from a fire. She had ruled the empire for over 3,000 years. Her shell was darker than the others, almost black, with lines of gold running through it like veins of precious metal. Her eyes did not shift color like the soldiers' eyes. They stayed a deep, endless purple, and when they looked at Jake, he felt like she was reading every secret he had ever kept. "A human," the Queen said. Her voice was like wind through crystal chimes. "We have not seen one of your kind in this sector for many cycles." Jake tried to stand straight. His legs were shaking, but he did not want to show fear. "Your Majesty," he said, because he had watched enough old movies to know you should always be polite to royalty. "My ship crashed on your planet. I mean no harm. I'm just a cargo pilot trying to get home." The Queen tilted her head. Her eyes seemed to glow brighter. A cargo pilot, how interesting. Such a small creature traveling alone through such a vast universe. "We're a stubborn species," Jake said. "We don't like staying in one place." Something changed in the Queen's expression. Jake was not sure what it meant. Faces did not work like human faces, but he thought maybe she was amused. "Most species that stumble onto our world do not leave," the Queen said. "We value our privacy. We do not enjoy visitors who come uninvited." Jake felt his heart sink. Here it comes, he thought, the death sentence. But instead the queen raised one of her 4 hands. However, you interest me, little human. Your species is young. You spread across the stars like weeds, growing everywhere, impossible to remove. I have always wondered what makes you so persistent. She stood from her throne and walked toward him. Each step she took echoed through the massive room. When she stopped in front of Jake, she towered over him like a monument. You will stay in my palace, she said. As an honored guest, you will answer my questions about your kind, and perhaps in time I will allow you to leave. It was not really a choice. Jake understood that, but it was better than dying, so he nodded and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." The queen smiled. At least Jake thought it was a smile. "Take him to the guest quarters," she told her soldiers. "See that he is comfortable, and send word to my daughters. I believe they will want to meet our new guest." As the soldiers led Jake away, he felt a strange feeling in his stomach. Not just fear, something else. A warning, maybe, like the universe was trying to tell him something important. He should have listened to that feeling. Over the next few days, Jake learned about life in the palace. His room was large and beautiful, with windows that looked out over the alien city. Servants brought him food that tasted strange but did not kill him. He was allowed to walk in certain gardens and visit certain halls, always with guards watching from a distance. He learned that among the being chosen by royalty was the highest honor any being could receive. To be selected as a companion, a servant, or a bondmate by a member of the royal family meant your life had meaning. It meant you mattered. And he learned that refusing such an honor was not just rude. It was punishable by death. Jake was still thinking about this when he met Princess for the first time. She walked into his room without warning, her shell gleaming blue and silver, her eyes burning with curiosity. "So," she said, looking at him like he was the most interesting thing she had ever seen, "you are the human." Jake swallowed hard. "That's me." The princess smiled, and in that moment Jake knew his troubles were just beginning. Princess was the youngest of Queen's 7 daughters. She was also, as Jake quickly learned, the most curious and the most determined. When she wanted something, she did not stop until she got it. And she had decided she wanted Jake. It started with gifts. On the first morning after they met, Jake woke up to find a small box beside his bed. Inside was a gem the size of his fist, glowing with inner fire like a tiny star. "A gift from Her Highness," the servant told him. "From the minds of 7. She conquered that world herself when she was only 200 years old." Jake stared at the gem. She conquered a planet at 200. She was considered a late bloomer, the servant said without any hint of humor. The next day there was another gift. This time it was a map, not a paper map but a living hologram that floated in the air and showed dozens of star systems. A small card came with it. "These worlds are yours if you want them," the card read. "I would give you more, but I wanted to start small." Start small. She was offering him entire planets, and she called it starting small. Jake found the princess in the garden that afternoon. She was standing among flowers that sang soft melodies when the wind blew through them. Her shell caught the purple sunlight and threw it back in 1,000 different colors. "Your Highness," Jake said, trying to keep his voice calm, "I received your gifts." Turned to him with what he now recognized as excitement in her shifting eyes. "Did you like them? The gem is very rare. Only 12 exist in all the known galaxy, and the worlds I offered are rich in resources. You could build whatever you wanted there." "They're very generous," Jake said carefully, "but I can't accept them." The princess tilted her head. "Why not?" "Because where I come from, gifts like this mean something. They mean commitment. They mean intentions." Moved closer to him. She was so tall that Jake had to look up to meet her eyes. "Yes," she said, "that is exactly what they mean. I am showing you my intentions, Jake. I wish to bond with you." Jake felt cold despite the warm air. Bond. It is the highest form of connection between two beings, explained. Our bodies would merge at the genetic level. We would share thoughts, feelings, memories. You would become part of me and I would become part of you. Together, we would be something new, something greater. The coldness in Jake's stomach turned to ice. Merge? You mean physically merge, like become one creature? Yes, it is the most beautiful experience any being can have, and I am offering it to you. Her eyes glowed brighter. No human has ever been offered such an honor. You should be grateful. Jake took a step back. His mind was racing. This was not a marriage proposal. This was not a date invitation. This was an offer to literally become part of another creature, to lose himself completely in an alien being. Your Highness, he said, I'm flattered, really I am, but I don't think I'm ready for something like that. Made a sound that might have been a laugh. Of course you are not ready, that is why we will take time, I will court you properly, I will prove my worth to you, and when you are ready we will bond. She reached out and touched his face with one of her 4 hands. Her touch was cool and smooth. Do not worry, little human, I will be patient. She walked away, leaving Jake standing alone among the singing flowers, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. That night Jake found a friend, or at least something close to a friend. Was a servant in the palace, smaller than the other and with a shell that was dull gray instead of shimmering colors. Among his people, he was considered plain and unimportant. But he was kind, and when he saw the look on Jake's face during dinner, he stopped to ask if something was wrong. Jake told him everything, the gifts, the proposal, the bonding. His eyes went through several colors very quickly, which Jake had learned meant shock. The princess wishes to bond with you. Yes, and I don't want to bond with anyone. I just want to go home. Then you must tell her no. I tried that. She thinks I'm playing hard to get. Was quiet for a moment. That is a problem. Among my people, when a royal chooses someone, that person cannot refuse. The concept does not exist. To be chosen is the greatest honor. Why would anyone refuse? Because I don't want to stop being human, Jake said. Because I don't want my brain mixed up with someone else's brain. Because where I come from, we don't do this. I understand, said softly. But the princess will not understand. She will see your refusal as a game. She will try harder to win you, and if you keep refusing. What happens if I keep refusing? Did not answer. He did not need to. Jake saw it in his eyes. Death, that was what happened. Over the following weeks, his courtship grew more intense. She brought Jake to watch military parades where thousands of soldiers marched in perfect formation. She showed him her personal collection of weapons, each one taken from an enemy she had defeated in combat. She gave him more gifts, each one more valuable than the last. And she began touching him more often, a hand on his shoulder, fingers running through his hair. Once, she held his entire body in her 4 arms and told him that she could feel his heartbeat, and that it was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. Jake did not sleep well anymore. He kept dreaming of his body changing, his thoughts mixing with alien thoughts, his identity dissolving like sugar in water. One night came to his room with news. I have spoken to my mother, she said, her eyes burning gold with joy. She has given her blessing. The bonding ceremony will happen on the next lunar cycle. Jake felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. The next lunar cycle, that's only 3 weeks away. Yes, I know it is soon, but I could not wait any longer. I have chosen you, Jake. Soon we will be one. She pressed her face against his in what he now understood was a kiss. Are you not happy? Jake could not speak. He could barely breathe. When finally left, he sat on his bed for a long time, staring at the wall. 3 weeks. He had 3 weeks before he stopped being Jake and became something else entirely. He had to escape. There was no other choice. He found the next morning and grabbed his arm. I need your help, he whispered. I need to get off this planet. His eyes shifted through fear, worry, and finally, something that looked like determination. "It is impossible," he said. "No one escapes from the—" "Then I'll be the first," Jake said. "Please. If I stay here, I die. Maybe not my body, but everything that makes me who I am. Help me." Looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "There might be a way," he said, "but it is dangerous." Jake almost laughed. "More dangerous than losing myself forever." Did not laugh. "Yes," he said quietly, "much more dangerous." But Jake did not care. He would rather die trying to escape than live as something he was not. The plan began that night. The plan was simple, which was good because Jake did not have time for complicated. Every third night, a supply ship left the palace carrying waste materials to a processing station on the far side of the planet. From there, small scout ships flew regular patrols around the system. If Jake could steal one of those scouts, he might be able to reach a jump point and escape into faster-than-light travel before anyone caught him. "The security at the processing station is light," explained as they huddled in Jake's room, speaking in whispers. "Most consider such work beneath them. The guards there are bored and careless." "And the jump point?" Jake asked. "It is at the edge of the system. 6 hours of travel in a scout ship, but the patrol ships are faster. If they realize you are escaping, they will catch you before you reach it." Jake nodded. "Then I'll have to make sure they don't realize I'm escaping until it's too late." The night of the escape came too quickly and not quickly enough. Jake had spent 2 days preparing, hiding small amounts of food and water in his clothes, memorizing the layout of the processing station from maps had drawn. He had not slept more than an hour at a time. Every sound in the hallway made his heart race, made him think had discovered his plan. But noticed nothing. She was too busy planning the bonding ceremony. She visited Jake every day to tell him about the decorations, the guests, the special rituals they would perform. Her excitement made Jake feel sick. When the palace grew quiet and the purple moon hung low in the sky, Jake made his move. Met him in the service corridors, the hidden pathways that servants used to move through the palace without being seen. Together, they crept through the darkness until they reached the loading bay where the waste ship waited. "Hide inside the third container," whispered. "It carries organic waste from the kitchens. The smell will cover your scent. The guards at the station will not check it carefully." Jake wrinkled his nose. "Organic waste, wonderful." Grabbed Jake's arm, and for a moment, Jake saw real concern in the small's eyes. "Be careful, Jake, if they catch you." "I know," Jake said. "Thank you for everything." Released his arm and stepped back into the shadows. "Go, and do not stop until you reach your human space." Jake climbed into the container. The smell hit him like a physical force, rotten and sour and terrible. He pulled his shirt over his nose and pressed himself into a corner, trying not to touch anything more than he had to. Then the container sealed, and everything went dark. The next few hours were the worst of Jake's life. The container shook and rattled as the ship took off and flew across the planet. The smell grew worse as the temperature rose. Jake had to fight not to be sick. He had to fight not to scream. Finally, the shaking stopped. He heard voices outside, muffled and distant, then nothing. Jake waited, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10. When he could not wait any longer, he pushed open the container and climbed out into the dim light of the processing station. The air was thick with dust and the hum of machinery. Massive pipes ran along the walls, carrying waste to places Jake did not want to think about. And there, sitting on a landing pad outside, were 3 scout ships. He found a side door and slipped outside. The sky above was black and full of stars, more stars than he had ever seen on Earth or any human colony. For a moment he just stood there, looking up, thinking about home. Then he ran. The scout ships were small and sleek, built for speed. Jake chose the one farthest from the main building, hoping it would take the guards longer to notice it was gone. The door opened when he touched it, which surprised him, but he did not stop to wonder why. He climbed inside, sat in the pilot's seat and looked at the controls. They were not human controls, of course they were not. But Jake had flown cargo ships for 12 years. He had worked with alien technology before, and some things were universal. Thrust was thrust. Steering was steering. He could figure this out. It took him 4 minutes to get the ship off the ground. It was the longest 4 minutes of his life. Every second, he expected alarms to sound, expected guards to come running, expected herself to appear and drag him back to the palace. But nothing happened. The ship rose into the air and Jake pointed it toward the stars. He was 3 hours into his flight when the alarms finally started. Not on the ground, on his ship. Lights flashed red across the console. A voice spoke in the language, words Jake did not understand but tones he recognized. Warning. Danger, turn back. He looked at his sensors and saw them. 12 ships coming from the planet, moving fast, much faster than his little scout. Leading them all was a ship larger than the others, its hull decorated with silver and blue markings. Even without being told, Jake knew who was on that ship. No, he muttered. No, no, no. He pushed the engines as hard as they would go. The ship shook and groaned around him. On the sensors, the jump point appeared as a small bright dot 3 hours away. The pursuing ships were gaining, cutting that distance with every passing minute. Jake flew like he had never flown before. He dodged through an asteroid belt, using the tumbling rocks as cover, scraping his hull against stones the size of houses. He dove into the shadow of a dead moon, hoping its radiation would hide his heat signature. He tried every trick he had learned in 12 years of flying dangerous cargo through dangerous space. But there were better. 2 hours from the jump point, they caught up to him. 1 hour from freedom, ship appeared directly in front of him, blocking his path. He tried to go around, but her tractor beam locked onto his hull and held him in place. No, Jake said again, pounding the console with his fist. Come on, come on. But the ship did not move. It could not move. The tractor beam pulled him slowly, steadily back toward the... When they dragged him off, the scout ship was waiting. Her eyes were not gold with joy anymore. They were red with something else. Hurt, maybe, or anger, or both. You ran from me, she said. Her voice was quiet, which somehow made it worse. I offered you everything and you ran. Jake did not answer. There was nothing to say. The soldiers put cuffs on his wrists and led him away. This time, they did not take him to the guest quarters. They took him to a cell deep in the palace where the walls were stone and the air was cold. Jake sat in the darkness and waited for whatever came next. He did not have to wait long. The next morning, a soldier came to his cell and pulled him roughly to his feet. The Queen wishes to speak with you, the soldier said. She wants to know why you ran from her daughter. Jake's heart sank. He had known this moment would come. He had just hoped he would be far away when it happened. But now there was no escape, no tricks, no hiding. Now he would have to face Queen and answer the question that no one had ever asked. Why would anyone refuse a princess? Jake took a deep breath and followed the soldier out of the cell. He did not know what he was going to say. He only knew that whatever he said, it had to be the truth. It was the only thing he had left. The throne room was full of when Jake arrived. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, standing in perfect rows along the walls, their eyes shifting colors as they watched the small human being led through their midst. Soldiers, nobles, servants, all of them silent, all of them waiting. At the far end of the room, Queen sat on her throne of crystal and light. She looked the same as she had the first day Jake met her, ancient and powerful and terrifying. But there was something different in her eyes now, something cold, something dangerous. Beside the throne stood Princess. She did not look at Jake. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, her 4 arms crossed over her chest. She looked smaller than before somehow, broken. The soldiers pushed Jake forward until he stood at the base of the throne, alone and exposed. The Queen looked down at him like a giant looking at an insect. Jake, she said. Her voice echoed through the massive room, filling every corner, pressing against Jake's ears like a physical weight. "You have done something that has never been done in the history of my empire. You have refused my daughter, and when she gave you time to understand your error, you ran from her like a coward." Jake said nothing. His throat was too dry to speak. The queen leaned forward on her throne. "My advisors say I should kill you. They say your actions are an insult to the royal family, to the empire, to everything we have built over 10,000 years. And perhaps they are right." She paused. The silence in the room was absolute. "But I am old," the queen continued. "I have seen many things. I have learned that sometimes the unexpected can teach us more than the expected. So before I decide your fate, I will give you one chance to speak." She rose from her throne and walked down the steps toward Jake. Each step she took seemed to shake the floor. When she stopped in front of him, she was so close that he could see his own reflection in her dark shell. "Tell me, human," she said. "Tell me why. Why did you run from my daughter? Why did you refuse the greatest honor any being can receive? Why did you spit on everything we offered you?" Jake looked up at her. His legs were shaking. His hands were trembling. But somewhere deep inside him, in a place he did not know existed, he found something. Courage, maybe, or just stubbornness. The same stubbornness that had made humans spread across the stars like weeds, growing everywhere, impossible to remove. "Your Majesty," he said, and his voice was steadier than he expected, "I didn't refuse your daughter because I think she's not worthy. I didn't run because I was afraid of her." "Then why?" the queen demanded. "Explain yourself." Jake took a deep breath. "Princess is magnificent. She's powerful and beautiful and stronger than I could ever be. Your empire is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Your technology, your cities, your history, it's all beyond anything my people have built." "Then you should be honored to join us," the queen said. "You should be grateful to become part of something so much greater than yourself." "That's exactly the problem," Jake said. "You're asking me to become part of something else, but I don't want to become part of something else. I want to stay me." The queen's eyes narrowed. "You would choose to remain a small, weak, short-lived creature rather than merge with a princess of the, rather than live for thousands of years, rather than have power beyond your imagination." "Yes," Jake said, "because that power would not be mine. That long life would not be mine. If I merged with your daughter, Jake would die. Something new would be born, something with my memories and her memories all mixed together, but it would not be me. Not really." "That is foolish," the queen said. "The being that would result from the bonding would be greater than either of you alone." "Maybe," Jake said, "but it wouldn't be me, and I like being me. I'm not perfect. I'm not strong or powerful or ancient. I'm just a cargo pilot from a little colony on the edge of nowhere, but I'm real. I'm my own person, and I don't want to give that up." The queen stared at him. Her eyes had stopped shifting. They were fixed on his face, unmoving, unreadable. Behind her, Jake could see the other watching, their expressions strange, confused. "There's something else," Jake said. He knew he should stop talking. He knew every word he spoke might be his last, but he could not stop, not now. "Something about love that I don't think you understand." "Love?" The queen's voice was sharp. "You dare to speak to me about love? I have loved more beings than you could count. I have bonded with partners whose names are written in the stars. Do not presume to lecture me about love." "I'm not lecturing," Jake said. "I'm trying to explain. Where I come from, love is not about merging. It's not about becoming one being. It's about choosing to stay together even when you could leave." He looked past the queen who had finally raised her eyes to watch him. "When two humans love each other," Jake said, "they remain two separate people. They have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own dreams. Sometimes they disagree. Sometimes they hurt each other. Sometimes they are so different that it seems impossible for them to stay together." "That sounds terrible," the queen said. "That sounds like weakness." "Maybe it is," Jake agreed. "But it's also what makes it beautiful. Because every single day they choose each other again. Every morning they wake up and decide to stay. Not because they have to, not because they're merged into one creature that cannot separate, but because they want to. He paused, gathering his thoughts, trying to find the right words. "The bond you offer takes away that choice," he said. "Once and I merged, we could never each other. We could never decide to stay because we wanted to. We would stay because we had no other option. And to me, that's not love. That's a prison." The Queen was silent. "Your daughter deserves better than that," Jake said. "She deserves someone who wakes up every day and chooses her. Someone who could leave but never does. Someone who loves her not because they have to, but because they cannot imagine a life without her." He looked at again. "I'm not that person. I'm just a human who crashed on your planet and wanted to go home. But somewhere out there, that person exists. Someone who will choose your daughter freely, willingly, every single day. And that kind of love will be worth more than anything I could offer through a forced bonding." Jake stopped talking. He had said everything he could say. Now it was up to the Queen. The silence stretched on. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. The in the room did not move. They did not even seem to breathe. Finally, Queen spoke. "In 3,000 years," she said slowly, "no one has ever spoken to me like that. No one has ever made me question the ways of my people. No one has ever suggested that there might be something valuable in weakness, in separation, in the fragile choice you describe." She turned away from Jake and walked back toward her throne. "I do not know what to do with you, Jake," she said. "I need time to think." She sat on her throne and waved one of her hands. "Take him back to his quarters, the comfortable ones, not the cell, and see that he is not disturbed." The soldiers stepped forward, but gently this time. As they led Jake away, he looked back at the throne. Queen was staring at nothing, her ancient eyes lost in thought. And beside her, Princess was looking at Jake with something new in her eyes. Not anger, not hurt. Curiosity. Jake did not know what would happen next, but for the first time since he crashed on this planet, he felt something like hope. 3 days passed, and Jake heard nothing from the Queen. He was kept in his old quarters, the comfortable ones with the large windows and the view of the alien city. Servants brought him food and clean clothes. Guards stood outside his door, but they did not treat him like a prisoner. They treated him like something they did not quite understand. Jake spent most of his time at the window, watching the strange city below. He thought about home. He thought about his old ship, the dusty runner, probably still sitting in pieces where it had crashed. He thought about the life he had left behind. The cargo runs through lonely stretches of space, the quiet nights staring at stars. He wondered if he would ever see any of it again. On the second day, came to visit. She did not burst into the room like before. She stood at the door and waited until Jake noticed her. Then she asked, quietly, if she could come in. "Of course," Jake said, surprised by her politeness. Walked slowly into the room and stood by the window, looking out at the same view Jake had been watching. For a long time, she did not speak. "I have been thinking about what you said," she finally told him. "About choosing, about staying together because you want to, not because you have to." And Jake asked. "It is strange to me," admitted. "My whole life, I believed that bonding was the highest form of connection. Two beings becoming one, sharing everything, never separate again. How could anything be more perfect than that?" "It sounds perfect," Jake said. "In a way, but perfection is not always the same as happiness." Turned to look at him. Her eyes were softer than he had ever seen them, shifting through colors slowly, gently. "When you refused me, I was angry. I thought you were insulting me. I thought you were saying I was not good enough for you." "That's not what I meant at all," Jake said. "I know that now." Moved closer to him, but she did not try to touch him. She just stood there looking at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "You were not rejecting me. You were protecting yourself, protecting what makes you who you are." "Yes," Jake said, "that's exactly it." Among my people, we do not think about identity the way you do, said. We see ourselves as parts of a greater whole. The family, the empire, the species. To merge with another is to become something larger. We do not fear losing ourselves because we do not think of ourselves as separate to begin with. Jake nodded slowly. That makes sense. Your culture evolved differently from mine. Neither way is wrong, they're just different. But your way has something ours does not, said. The choice. The daily decision to stay. I never thought about that before. I never realized how meaningful that could be. She turned back to the window. I think I was trying to capture you, she said quietly. Like I capture worlds, take them, claim them, make them part of my empire forever. But you cannot capture a person. Not really. Not if you want them to love you. Jake felt something shift in his chest. Sympathy, maybe, or respect. Was trying to understand something completely foreign to her entire way of life. That took courage. Maybe someday you'll find someone who wants to bond with you, he said. Someone from your own people, or from another species that shares your traditions. Someone who will choose that kind of connection because it's what they truly want. Smiled. It was a sad smile, but a real one. Maybe, or maybe I will try your way. Find someone who stays with me by choice every day, even though they could leave. That would be beautiful, Jake said. Looked at him one last time. Thank you, Jake. You have taught me something I did not know I needed to learn. Then she left, walking quietly out of the room, and Jake was alone again. On the third day, the soldiers came to take Jake before the queen. The throne room was empty this time. No crowds, no watching nobles, no silent servants. Just Queen sitting on her throne and Jake standing before her. I have thought about your words for 3 days, the queen said. I have lived for 3,000 years and I thought I understood the universe. I thought I knew every kind of love, every kind of connection, every way that beings could come together. She stood and walked down from her throne. But this time when she stopped in front of Jake, there was no anger in her eyes. There was something else, something that looked almost like respect. You have shown me that I was wrong, she said. There are things that younger species understand that we have forgotten. Perhaps in our quest for unity we lost something valuable, the beauty of remaining separate, the meaning of choice. Jake did not know what to say, so he said nothing. You will be released, the queen continued. Your ship will be repaired and returned to you. You will be given supplies and safe passage through our territory. Relief flooded through Jake's body. He had to fight to keep his knees from giving out. Thank you, your majesty. Do not thank me yet, the queen said. I have a request. Anything, Jake said, and he meant it. My daughter wishes to learn more about your kind, about your way of loving, your way of living. She has asked permission to visit human worlds, to study your species, to understand what makes you so different from us. Jake blinked in surprise. Wants to visit human space. Yes, and I have agreed to allow it on one condition. The queen's eyes fixed on Jake's face. She needs a guide, someone who can teach her your ways, introduce her to your people, protect her in a universe that does not always welcome strangers. You want me to be her guide? Jake asked. I am asking if you will consider it, the queen said. Not as a prisoner, not as a bondmate, as a friend if such a thing is possible between our kinds. Jake thought about it. He thought about his quiet life as a cargo pilot, the lonely runs through empty space, the years stretching out before him with nothing but stars for company. And then he thought about trying so hard to understand something new, reaching out across the vast gulf between their species with something like hope. Yes, he said, I'll do it. The queen nodded, and for the first time since Jake had met her, something that might have been a smile crossed her ancient face. Later that day, Jake stood in the landing bay beside his repaired ship. It looked better than it had before the crash, actually. The engineers had done good work. Beside him stood, looking nervous and excited and a little bit scared. She carried a small bag with her possessions. She wore simple clothes instead of her royal armor. She looked almost like a regular person instead of a princess. "Are you ready?" Jake asked. "No," admitted, "but I want to go anyway." Jake smiled. That's how adventure works. As they boarded the ship, Jake received one final transmission. Queen's face appeared on his screen, her eyes deep and unreadable. "Jake," she said, "you ran from the highest honor my empire can offer, and in doing so you have honored us more than any who stayed. Perhaps there is wisdom in stubbornness. Perhaps there is strength in being small." Jake did not know how to respond, so he just nodded. "Go well, human," the Queen said, "and take care of my daughter." The transmission ended. Jake powered up the engines and felt the ship rise into the sky. Beside him, pressed her face against the window, watching her world grow smaller below them. "What is it like?" she asked. "Human space?" "Messy," Jake said. "Complicated. Full of people making mistakes and trying to fix them and falling in love with the wrong people and somehow making it work anyway." "It sounds wonderful," said. Jake laughed. "Yeah," he said, pointing the ship toward the stars. "I guess it kind of is." The galaxy was vast and ancient and full of wonders. But sometimes the greatest wonder was a single human, standing firm in who he was, and in doing so changing everything. Jake flew home, carrying with him a princess who wanted to learn about choice, about love, about the beautiful fragility of staying together when you could just as easily fall apart. It was not the adventure he had planned, but it was exactly the adventure he needed. And somewhere behind them, an ancient queen sat on her throne and thought about things she had never thought before, about weakness that was strength, about separation that was connection, about the strange, stubborn, impossible species called humanity. She smiled to herself in the empty throne room. Perhaps the young could teach the old after all.